in-person and synchronous. This is what the Master of Information program is accredited for. So you'll be in Toronto, typically in our building, in the Bissell building where the iSchool is located, or some of the other buildings on the St. George campus, learning together with us in the same room. Most of the courses that you're going to take are worth 0.5 CR, 0.5 credits. This is just a standardized measure of how much you might expect to do in a course and how many of those you have to accumulate before you can graduate. Typically, but not always, that involves about 3 contact hours a week, 3 hours of lecture or interactive activities or workshops or tutorials, something in that general range for 12 weeks over the course of one semester or one term. And so if you do that and do all the required homework and all of the projects and stuff, you will get 0.5 CR, 0.5 credits. For the MI program, regardless of which concentration you are in, the program itself requires 8 credits to complete, which means that you need to take about 16 of those 0.5 credit courses, which works out to about 4.5 CR courses per term. Now, this implies that you're only going to do this 2 terms in the year, in the fall and the winter term typically. And so if you do 2 semesters and then 2 more semesters, each with a full course load, which is 4 half courses or 2.0 credits, then you are, you're learning full time and you will graduate within those 2 years. And I believe 4 half courses, the max you are allowed to enroll in without some additional discussions of overload and how else, how folks might be, you might need to get administrative permission to take more than that. Taking less has other implications, etc. But that's how these work. That's true across the university, whether you're taking our courses or external courses. But our workshops, the iSchool workshops, which are 1005 and 1006, they're required for all MI students. We'll talk about them in a second. They're actually worth 0.25 or a quarter of a credit. And so those are 3 contact hours for 6 weeks instead of 12 weeks. And you can do 2 of them in one semester. And so they're a little bit of the exception to that. So most courses are 0.5, these are 0.25. And in fact, we have some courses that are 1.0 CR courses as well at the university, which typically run over 2 consecutive terms. Now, I don't believe we have a lot of those at the iSchool, certainly not at the MI level, but I could be wrong. And so if you see a 1.0 CR course, you'll know that that's it's going to involve more time. It'll be a course for longer, it'll involve more contact hours in a week. This is all making sense. None of this is a surprise to anyone. All good. Thank you. In terms of terms, school terms generally are 3 terms of 12 weeks, the fall term, the winter term, and the summer term. Now, fall term is 12 weeks this year. That starts on September 7th. September 7th is a Thursday. So the first day of classes this year is Thursday, September 7th, and it runs for 12 weeks until early December. December 6th is the last day of classes, and we have a reading week in the fall from November 6th through the 10th. In the winter, we start again after New Year's in January 8th. Not sure what day of the week that is. It might be a Monday, but we'll find out. And those run until April 5th. 12 weeks, and reading week is December. It's February 19th to the 23rd. So reading week is February from February 19th to the 23rd, 2024. Now, the summer session is a little different. The summer session is not 12 weeks in length, the way that the other sessions might be. It is still 12 weeks, but it tends to offer kind of compressed, accelerated half credits when they are offered in the summer. So what you'll see is instead of 3 hours a week for 12 weeks, you'll see 6 hours a week for 6 weeks in 2 kind of sub-terms. So May 8th through June 19th this year is the first half term of the summer term, and then July 4th to August 14th is the second one. And in each of those, you might be able to take a full half credit course. And so that just means that you have double the amount of time per week that those courses require of you. So instead of having 1 lecture of 3 hours a week, you'll have 2 lectures of 3 hours those weeks. Right, and just to be clear about course codes and how these work, graduate level courses at U of T have code that consists of 3 letters plus 4 digits. something like BIO 1602, CSC 2514. That's kind of how you know it's a graduate level course, if it has 4 letters after the 4 numbers after the 3-letter code. iSchool course codes tend to start with INF. That's almost always true. MI courses certainly do. And after that course code, you'll see a designation, something like F, S, or Y. F typically stands for fall term. S typically stands for spring term or the winter term. So that's that January through April term. And Y stands for year-long courses. Those typically span 2 semesters or 2 terms. So INF 1602, the first required course you will take for the concentration, is being offered in the fall. That's why its course code is INF 1602F. INF 2191, the course that I'll be teaching in the 2nd semester that you'll be taking with me, is designated S because it will take place in the winter of 2024 term. Now, these designations are a little bit strange in the summer. In the summer, we still have F and S and Y courses, but they are, F in this case means the first half of the summer, S means the second half of the summer, and Y means the full 12 weeks of summer. Unless you're taking summer courses, you don't necessarily need to worry about that, but that is how that works. Any more questions? Any questions at all? I am speaking into the void, and I don't mind it, but I'd like to know that we are coming through and coming along well. How's everyone feeling about that so far? Get a few thumbs ups. Great. If you're curious, I feel great about it. We're doing well. Good stuff. Okay. For now is important. Okay, so this is important, and here's where we can really get confused if we're not careful. So when you go to register for a course, you're going to need that course code. You're going to need to know what course you're registering for. And every course you're going to register for is going to have at least one lecture section. Course code, lecture section, they're going to go together. And the lecture section is basically, one of the sections that is offering the instruction, right? Somebody will be speaking at the front of the room, you'll be doing the thing. It's the main thing you need to register for in the course. They're designated LEC with a 4-digit number after them, a 101, a 102, and as many as needed. Each of those is a different alternative for when you can take that course. So when you see LECO 101, LECO 102 on the timetable, they'll be scheduled at different times, usually, or in different rooms, and you have to select one of those 2 lectures. Lecture sections are interchangeable. You can pick any one of them, but you need to register for one lecture section to attend the course. And typically you register for the one that works best with your schedule or the one that there is room in, which is often also a challenge. Okay, so the simplest one of these is you have one course, there's a course code, INF 2200, for example, that has one lecture section, LECO 101. Okay, you know what you're registering for, this course and this section during this term. Now, some courses, and especially some of the courses that you're about to run into right away, starting in September, also have a PRA set of sections or a TUT set of sections. PRA stands for practicum, and TUT stands for tutorial. Now, these are sections that show up in addition to the lecture section. So when you register for a course, you must register in one lecture section, and you also typically must register in one of those other sections, whether it's PRA or TUT. They're never mixed in together. Either it's 6 PRA options or 6 TUT options, or 1 or 2 or however many there are. So you need to register for one lecture section and one practicum section. If you only register for the lecture section, then that is not a complete registration. You're not going to be able to attend those important exercises or tutorials. There's no obvious difference between a PRA and a TUT. And every course is a little bit different. These might be taught by teaching assistants, or they might be places for independent guided work on course projects and things like that. But in either case, you need to register for a lecture section plus one of these others. And again, you choose them based on what your scheduling is like. I will give you an example from our timetable. This is a real course that we are really offering and you're really going to be taking in the winter term. So the course is user-centered information systems development. That is a required course in our concentration. And so what you're going to see in the timetable is something like this. You're going to see a whole bunch of rows for this course, and it may not be obvious what these are or what each of them is good for. So your job here is to register for one lecture section. Thankfully, there's no choice here, right? There's only LEC 0101, Mondays 10 to 12. Great, you're going to register for that one. But also you have to register for one of the tutorial sections below. All right, so TUT 101, 102, etc., all the way down. And each of them, as you can see, occurs at a different time. So one lecture section and whichever tutorial section you prefer, or there is space for. Okay, this designation makes sense. Everybody is happy with that. I'll give you one last bit of general advice, let's call it, and then we'll switch to talking about UXD specifically. I know this may be familiar to you already, but a couple of things to talk about. This is kind of important. You should register for your courses as early as you are allowed to do so. So you are going to get an email at some point from Acorn, our course management system. You may have already had dealings with it. It's called Acorn because one of the kind of heraldic elements at U of T is, the tree of knowledge, which is an oak tree, and we've got acorns on our coat of arms, and so Acorn is a really nice name for, for the course registration system. And by the way, Quarkus, which is our learning management system, is also called Quarkus because Quarkus is Latin for oak, I believe. Let's hope that's true. So anyway, you're going to get a specific time when you can start registering. Please go in and use that time. Register as soon as that hits. Not later that day, not next week. When you have your time window, you should have all your course selections ready. First choices and maybe backup choices, only because many of our courses sell out. This is especially true for electives or workshops. It is less true for required courses. So there is enough space in all of our required courses for everyone coming into the cohort, which this year I think is about 180 of you, which is a fair few, maybe slightly fewer. But we have enough space for everybody, but you may not get the scheduled time that you would like. And so make sure that you have, that you're on the ball, you know what you're going to register for, and you do so as soon as you are allowed to. If it turns out that the thing you're trying to register for is full, you may put yourself on a wait list for it. Lecture sections maintain a wait list. Tutorial sessions do not maintain a wait list. It's expected that if you're in a lecture section, then you should be also registered in a tutorial or a practicum section. The waitlist registration stuff is a whole other session. We don't have to worry about it if we register on time, but you are probably going to be waitlisted for one or two courses. So we can chat about that in more detail later on. Generally, in the concentration required courses, have a section limit of about 70 students, and you might offer 2 or 3 different sections for that course. Elective courses have a limit of between 35 and 50 students. It's either 35 or 50. Sometimes it's more, but that's kind of on a course-by-course basis. All right, so we're going to register as early as we're allowed to, and we're going to note to register for an LEC and also for a PRA if those are available. And again, most courses won't have both. Most courses will just have one LEC option or 2 LEC options, or at most 3. But you're not going to miss out or skip out on the PRA registrations now that we know this. Ashwak has a good question. How do we plan on selecting courses for co-op students? That is a really good question. We are going to talk about that. So co-op is an option for all our students. And in UXD, we have worked to make required courses work around the co-op schedule. So we are going to talk about co-op in a bit more detail in a second. If I don't answer that question by the time we're at quarter 2, please ask me again. But yeah, we've got some things to talk about there. Are there any other questions that are coming up for you folks now? Anything about what we've talked about so far, or anything that you hope we talk about later on?
So I did have one more question. If we do miss out on registering with the elective courses, right? How does it work? I mean, let's say we get shortlisted or waitlisted, right? How does it work then? What happens then? What can we do possibly?
Right. So what happens if if you're unable to register for an elective course and you get waitlisted, then you're going to get on the waitlist with a specific place in line. So it's almost like we've got 70 students, and then we have, student 71 is on the waitlist in first place. And then you are basically in a queue. So the earlier you register, the closer you are to the end of that line, or the beginning of that line, depending on how you think about it. And as people who registered for those courses drop out, which sometimes there's always a little bit of movement at the beginning of the term. So people register for a bunch of courses, and then it'll turn out that they're not able to attend all of them, or they over-registered, or they want to drop some, or they go to the first lecture and turns out that's not for them, that kind of thing. So as students drop out, you automatically get enrolled in the section that you're waitlisted for. If that happens, it'll happen in the first week or two. There's a date at which all waitlists dissolve, meaning that by that time, if you're not off the waitlist, you just don't get to enroll in the course. And I'm not sure what that deadline is this year, but there's a deadline for the fall and a deadline for the winter. There's some other specifics, like you cannot be enrolled in a section of the course and waitlisted for a different section. You can't, kind of hedge your bets that way. And if you're waitlisted for multiple sections of a course, the moment you enrolled in one, it automatically takes you off the waitlist for the other sections of that course. And so that's the practicality of that experience. Is waitlists can sometimes be very long for electives that are popular. In most cases, you should be able to get into the courses that you want, or, you should aim to choose, 3 or 4 electives for 2 slots that you have in the term, and then you'll get into some of those. And so try to have, a slightly more choices already made than the number of slots you have. It's going to be 4 courses in the fall. And so if you know which ones you're signing up for, have 1 or 2 that you would like to take as, or almost backups. If one course is register for everything you can register for, try to be on as few wait lists as possible. And then, yeah, it's hard to explain the full experience that way, but that's kind of how that works from an administrative standpoint. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Just to follow up on that. So I believe for the fall term we have 3 required courses, and so we can take 1 more elective. Is that how that works, or
That's correct.
because
Yeah, if you have,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. So if you have 3 required courses, yeah, and the fall is probably the least flexible of our terms, the first fall term, and yeah, so that's when you only have room for 1 elective, and we'll see which one that could be. I got a few more questions here. Andy says, I heard we're automatically registered into the required courses for the first year. Will we still need to register for these this August? That is an excellent question. I'm not sure how possible it is to get automatically registered, given that some of our required courses have multiple sections in them. That's a better question to ask Alicia or Student Services. When you go to register in August, you'll have to register in at least 1 elective. That's a good time to double check that you have in fact been enrolled in these courses. If you're automatically registered in required courses, double check that the section you registered in is correct, or yeah. That's a really good question that I will find out more about. Again, automatically registering for 1602 is great, but 1602 has 6 practicum sections. And so which one you're registered for kind of matters as well. So I will ask about that auto registration. And Alicia has a great point. Please email admissions.ischool to confirm that. Yeah, that's great. Paris says, I saw on Acorn that 1602 has 2 sessions, Monday and Thursday for 3 hours each. We will talk about 1602 separately because 1602 is kind of an unusual schedule. Yeah, so I'll talk you through what that looks like. What is the maximum number of credits we can take per term? So 4 half credits is the expected full-time load, right? That is 4 half credit courses. You need permission to take more than that. I am not sure what the absolute max is. I would guess that 6 is impossible or 6 is difficult. That's the kind of thing you should ask your student advisor when you get one, or yeah, email admissions and they will send you along on that one. So Candace, yeah, it is, from a workload perspective, honestly, think of it as 4. 4 is plenty, especially in your first term. 5 is possible, but you'd need special permission for it and may not be worth doing, right? Depending on what your reasons for taking more courses are. But again, if you have some specific situation or course selection in mind, come talk to me. Email admissions for the official max and come talk to me to kind of strategize your UXD journey. And I'll put my contact information at the end as well. Maury says, for INF 2170, it has a section from 9 p.m. to 12 p.m. on Friday. We'll double check that. 9 p.m., I don't believe we have any courses that start at 9 in the evening. That might just be 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., so 9 to noon. And I will make sure that's actually true. At a guess, it's a typo in the spreadsheet. So INF 2170, 9 to 12. Yeah, I'll double check at the end of the session and let you know. But I would say there's probably a morning course and not a midnight rave course. Is there a list of all the electives and their descriptions? Yep. So we have a full list of courses. Now, you might be eligible for a whole lot of electives. We are going to talk about the ones that we recommend you consider today. So UXD electives are going to be different from ISD electives, from HCDS electives, from CNT electives. And so we will talk about exactly what we think about for that. Oh, and Ashfaq says, yeah, great. 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. for 2170. That sounds more likely. Okay, keep those questions coming, but I'm going to give you some answers regarding our concentration. So courses in UXD, let's talk about what that sequence of courses looks like. So when we think of user experience design, we may be imagining some process like this. You start with a very rough sketch, and then your interface, your application, your user experience becomes more and more and more polished until you have the final version of it. And that's, to an extent, that's true, but this is not a linear process that only follows one particular methodology. It's not just a design problem. In fact, what you learn in UXD is that the process begins with identifying a problem, a need, a user group that could use that need solved, and then there's a process of discovery and problem definition before we go to design a thing. And when we design a thing, in the yellow half of the process, then we're creating something and we are evaluating it as well. This is a very commonly known sequence. It's a common iteration. You'll notice that it's a little bit of a Ouroboros. It's a snake eating itself because this process is iterative and continues over and over again. And the required courses in the concentration are structured to mirror this process to an extent. So what are the required courses in UXD? You already know this. This is, you've probably seen these, but let's go through them to make sure. So we'll start with INF 1005 and 1006. These are information workshops that they are required for all MI students across the board. They're kind of a global concentration, global program requirement. We'll talk about these in a little bit of detail in a second, because they're a little bit different. Then 1602 is the first required course from our concentration. It is an overview of that entire process, right? So that squiggly snake, we get to try some research and some ideation and some design and some presentation. That course is taught by Professor St. Cyr this year, and it's the first one you'll be taking, basically. And then we have required course on mostly the research side, so understanding a situation, understanding a user group, understanding a problem before you go to solve it. That is INF 2169. It has a long and complicated name, something like user-centered information systems development. That course name is a little bit misleading. This is a course primarily about understanding the needs of users and conducting research on user groups. So that's where you get the most training in the first part of that snake. INF 2170 is an information architecture course. That's the course on how to structure information in the way that users of a product will access its information, what the hierarchy is like, what the navigation is going to be like, and also how to design our content as it comes in. By the way, all of these are half credits, including 1005 and 1006 add up to a half credit. Then we have INF 2191, that's user interface design. That's with me. I'll be teaching that in the winter of 2024. And that one is about putting pixels on a screen. Right? It's exactly knowing how everything is happening, what problem you're solving, how the information architecture should be. Now we get to put, we get to design the front end solution of that space. So each of those courses, 2169, 2170, 2191, they hit a different area of that process in more detail. So 1602 is the introduction to the whole process. Each of the next ones help with a specific section of it. And finally, we have representing UX, and that is INF 2192. That course is what we think of as the capstone or final project course for the concentration. What it will do is it will remind you, so it'll be another chance to try the whole process with some community partners, so with some external organization involvement, and you work in groups to create a project from start to finish. So your first end-to-end project will be in 1602 as a kind of first test or first practice of that experience, and then you get to do it again in 2192 at the end of your concentration. So those are our required courses. 5 required courses for the concentration, plus 1 pair of required workshops for the entire program. Now, we had questions about co-op. Let's talk about how these courses are structured over time. Meantime, 2 great questions. So Andy asks, will the electives have prerequisite requirements? Also, do any of the required courses have prerequisite knowledge we should know before entering? So the required courses do have prerequisites. Those prerequisites are other required courses. There's no prior knowledge you need before starting 1602. And the rest of them are kind of, they are in a dependency tree with each other. I believe you can't take 2192 unless you are in the UXD concentration and have taken the rest of the courses leading up to it. As for electives, many electives will have prerequisites, and those are meant mostly to, electives are they're supposed to be concentration agnostic, meaning that you could take an elective from any concentration, as a student of any concentration. In practice, that's actually not possible because many electives require prior knowledge in a specific field. And so those electives will have prerequisites, and those are usually pretty rigidly followed. You can request a professor to waive prerequisites for you. The professor has the authority to do that, but I really wouldn't unless you're really, really sure you have the equivalent knowledge. You did some work like this before, or you really believe that it's possible, or you're taking the same course, you're taking the course at the same time. So maybe it's a you can take them concurrently. Generally, respect the prerequisites of the electives that you see. And we'll talk about the prerequisites for some of our, by that I mean UXD focused electives in a second. In terms of background knowledge, don't worry about having any background knowledge before starting the program. You're admitted, we know you're here, and we know that you can do it. And that includes coding background. So we don't require coding, and we don't code in any of the required courses for UXD. There is coding in the program. There is coding for data science in one of the HCDS, Human-Centered Data Science courses. There's coding in ISD, Information Systems and Design, but you don't have to code to complete the concentration. Yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say about coding. And also any other technical skill you can think of, we are going to teach it to you, or it's not going to be a requirement. Question about course codes. If a course code starts with 2, that generally means it's taken after course codes that start with 1, but not always. It's really not a hard and fast rule. So you might take a lot of 2-something course codes in your first year, and that's not unusual. Yeah, these are mostly just, some are 1x courses, some are 2x courses. Generally, 1x courses are easier to get, they're kind of foundational courses for a particular concentration, and then 2x courses are building on top of those. But that's not a hard and fast rule. A few more questions. Workshop 1 and workshop 2. Yeah, there's a lot of differences between those two workshops. We'll talk about what those are like. Okay, so these are our required courses. I'll talk about workshops separately, and I'll talk about 1602 separately. But in the meantime, typically, where these show up, in the fall of 2023, you'll be taking 1602, 2170, actually those two. Yeah. Is that it? Yeah, I think those are the only ones for this year. So fall 2023, 1602 and 2170. So this is fundamentals of user experience and the information architecture course. So you actually have 2 elective slots in the fall. In the winter of 2024, so next semester, you are taking those workshop courses, which we'll talk about separately, 2169, which is the research course, and 2191, which is the course that I am teaching on user interface design. So in fact, your winter is a little bit heavier on required courses than your fall. Ashfaq asks a good question that I'm about to answer. In the fall of 2024, we don't have any required courses for you to take. Part of that is because co-op, a lot of our students are in co-op, and co-op is very heavy in the fall of your second year. So we don't want to put any required courses in that space. And in the winter of 2025, you have your last required course for the concentration, which is INF 2192. So you'll notice that almost all, as Ashfaq has asked, almost all of your required courses will be done by the end of first year. These are just the required courses. Right? So you'll notice that in the fall, you've got 2 slots. In the winter, you've got 1 slot to fill. In the fall of 2024, you might be on co-op, or you might be selecting 4 electives. And in the winter of 2025, that's right, the winter of 2025, which is when most of you are slated to graduate. If you're full-time, you will be taking the Representing UX capstone course, INF 2192. Now, it's important to mention and think about how this intersects with co-op. So let's talk about co-op. The co-op education program involves going on 2 work placement terms over the course of your degree. So 2 semesters, you're going to be working for a company instead of, learning full-time. The way to do co-op, so there's a few kind of prerequisites, a few kind of stages to get through. Number 1, make sure you're enrolling in the co-op option for the concentration and not the non-co-op pathway. Then you need to keep a minimum GPA of 3.75 out of 4. So you need a certain level of grades or higher, typically in your first semester, that matters the most, in order to be eligible for co-op. Then one of those 2 slots in fall of 2023 will be taken up by a course called INF 3900. That course is called the Emerging Professional, and it is a course that you have to take before you can go on co-op. So everybody from every concentration takes 3900 in the fall before they go on co-op. So in the fall term, you'll be taking 1602, 2170, and 3900 if you are in co-op. Okay. Then in the winter term, you're going to start looking for placement opportunities and jobs, co-op jobs for the summer. Typically, our students go on co-op placements in the summer after their first year and in the fall of their second year, which is why you'll notice we don't have any required courses in fall of your second year, because many of you might be on co-op that year or that term. And then what happens is you have to actually, once you do 2 terms of co-op, you have to come back and take one more term of you take a bunch of courses in the winter of your second year, and then you might have 1 more term's worth of courses to finish up. So you'll graduate at the end of the summer of your second year instead of at the end of the winter of your second year. And that's important because your final term cannot be a co-op placement term. So you can't graduate on a co-op placement. Typically, again, most of our students go on co-op in the summer between first and second year and in the fall of their second year. That is not a requirement. You can kind of shuffle around with these. That's when most of the opportunities are available. And again, you can go anywhere you want as long as you don't try to graduate on a co-op term. Your last term has to be an in-school instructional term. All right, you got some questions for co-op, and then we'll talk about 1005, 1006. Let's see here. Could we do both co-op and a double concentration? Yeah, that's a really good question. Double concentrations are... I don't have a good answer for that. It is going to severely limit your electives. It is going to delay a lot of stuff because double concentrations are already mushing their required courses into each other. And I'm not even sure double concentrations are even slightly encouraged for your cohort. So this is a question best asked at admissions or when you get into the program, once you start to inquire.iSchool. I think I've had students who've done that. It just is either a lot more intense or takes a lot longer. Yeah, concentration shifting is challenging, and so you might be able to switch to a second concentration, but you'll notice that the cadence of our courses is very well geared towards somebody just taking UXD courses. If you get two cadences like that and you mash them together, chances are you'll miss some required courses from one concentration because they conflict with, etc. Yeah, so double concentration questions, I don't have a lot of good answers for. Paris asks, can we take a class during the fall co-op term? Yes, if your schedule allows it, you can always take an evening course during your co-op term, or if you ask your co-op supervisor, your boss at your placement, they can permit you to take a course during the day. They're not required to, but they can. Last thought about this is that being in the co-op program, being in the co-op option does not guarantee your work placement. It guarantees you the tools to succeed as a professional. You get to learn how to do applying for jobs, and it guarantees you access to a pool of job postings. Right, so it is possible, although it's fairly rare, that you'll be in co-op, you'll look for jobs, and you won't be able to find a placement for a particular term. That has happened before. It's not frequent, but it really depends on how the labor market works that particular year, if companies have room for co-op students and how stringent they're being in their vetting process. We do have to move on because this is not the, we do have some electives to get to. Are both co-op terms required? Yeah, so if you do one co-op term but not the second co-op term, you're not going to get the designation, the co-op designation on your transcript when you graduate. It'll still be a valuable experience, but I believe you need to do both terms. And in fact, you could do one placement over 8 months and do both terms in the same place, although I generally recommend against that. I recommend doing 2 separate 4-month placements. INF 3900 is mandatory for co-op placement, I believe. So you do need to take it with us in the fall. Okay, moving along. We've only got 10 minutes, and if you folks are able to stay a little bit longer, I'm happy to stay a little bit longer with you, but let's make sure we get through that. Co-op independent modules. Ethan, what are co-op independent modules? Are these 3902, 3903, those things?
Hi, Professor.
I'll come back to you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I wanted to jump in and talk about that because I went to a enrollment event on campus this past weekend, and they talk about that. So you can do the independent modules. There are a series of workshops on interviews, like resume, cover letter writing, like there are workshops throughout the semester instead of the actual class. But the class is for credit and the modules are not for credit. You get to choose. But for the modules, you have to make sure you stay on track and go to every single one of them. Otherwise, you don't satisfy the requirement. Just want to jump in there.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I was mistaken about that. Yeah, so it is possible to fulfill those requirements with independent workshops or independent modules. But you won't get credit for them. And so that's kind of an extracurricular thing to try and do. Thank you for that correction. Yeah. All right. Few words on independent workshops, on information workshops, a few words on 1602, and a few words on some electives. So the way information workshops work, you're going to be taking them in the winter of your first year. you want to take two of them, one in the 1005 and 1006. Basically take 1005 in the first 6 weeks of the winter term, take 1006 in the second 6 weeks. That's what those course codes mean. 1005 is only offered in the first 6 weeks, 1006 in the second set of 6 weeks. And these are a little bit different. For most courses, your lecture section is just a scheduling thing. Lecture 101, 102, 103 just means do you want to take it in the morning, in the evening, or on Thursdays. For information workshops, each lecture section is a different workshop. Each lecture section offers a different topic of a workshop. So 101 and 102 are not interchangeable. You have to take the one that you are interested in from the list of, I think there's 14 or 16 this year. They're typically offered twice, right? Once as 1005, once as 1006. And so those are, you can take any of the workshops you can take as first half or the second half, first half or second half. And you want two different ones, to slot them into your schedule. And you see the list of those is very extensive. There's all kinds of topics. A few of them sound UX related. Many of them do not. For these, I recommend that you take the ones that you find interesting and not the ones that sound the most UXD specific. Right? The UXD courses that we offer are plenty of specificity and plenty of detail about the program, about the concentration, about the field of UX. This is your only chance to take something that is totally wild and out of scope for you. History of the book, or book binding for beginners, whatever fun stuff we offer in those workshops, consider any of them as viable. This is especially important because you might see that the ones that sound UXy, because we are one of the largest concentrations in the MI program, the ones that sound UXy will sell out first. The information workshops, there are enough information workshop spots for everybody in the program, but there aren't enough in one specific workshop for all of you who want to take it. So the workshops cap out at 25 or 30, and chances are, if you're like, oh, graphic design for UX, it'll be super full, and you don't need it, right? If you're super passionate about that and you'd like take it, by all means go ahead. But if you're not able to, or you find out that it's super sold out, this is a chance to take, interesting, broad, courses that are more exciting to you as a person in your other domains, in your other interests, than something that specifically has to be UX relevant. Okay, so this will look like you might take INF 1005, lecture section 103, which is one particular type of, it's one of those workshops with the topic and that's going to be the first 6 weeks of the winter term. And then you'll take 1006 with a different lecture section. And that's going to be a different topic in the second half. When do we get to select the topics? So on Acorn, you have to register for the lecture section, LEC, whatever, that matches the topic. I still don't know how auto registration works. I apologize. This is a question for other folks. What I do know is how 1602 will be taught this year. Ashfaq asks a great question. So the workshops for this year are listed in the course timetables. So the course timetable is available as an Excel file on the iSchool homepage. I will paste a link to that at the end of the session. And you'll see a list of 14 or 16, 1005s. Alicia, thank you. Yeah, so email admissions for all the auto registration stuff. I think it's one of the first years we've tried it, and so it may be an interesting time for that. Okay, let's talk about 1602 because this is pretty important. You all have to register for it. It is an important course, and it has a very unusual schedule. So most courses, very consistent, 3 hours a week for 12 weeks. 1602 is not like that. It is a practical, like workshop course. Lowercase w, not uppercase w. It's not a 1005, 1006. What it is for the first 4 weeks of class, all of you will attend 6 hours of lectures per week. I'll say it again. For the first 4 weeks of class, you're on the hook for Thursdays and Mondays, 6 to 9 in the big lecture theater. Okay, so this is 8 lectures over the first 4 weeks to get you ramped up on the theory of the course. So basically, you're taking all of the instruction you might have received over the full 12 weeks, squishing it into the first 4. It'll be more intense for the first 4. You have a little bit of homework to do that, but it'll mostly be big, giant lecture theater with a lot of instruction. So there's only one lecture section for 1602, and it's the one that lets you into Thursdays and Mondays, 6 to 9. Please notice I've listed the Thursday first because Thursday, September 7th, the first day of classes, is also your first lecture for 1602 in the evening. So make sure you keep track of that. And then the schedule completely changes for the last 8 weeks of the course. Weeks 5 through 12, each of you will attend one of the PRA sections. Each section is listed for 2 hours of a studio activity. So those are either working studios where you work on a group project in small groups, or they are playback studios in which you present your work to the instructor and other people. They are led by teaching assistants, with the instructor usually being around to answer questions. So the first 4 weeks are reading, learning. The last 8 weeks are making a thing together. So each of you will be registered in one of these 6. Monday 5 through 7, Monday 7 through 9, Tuesday 10 to noon, Tuesday 12 to 2, Wednesday 12 to 2, Wednesday 2 to 4. These are 6 different PRA sections. You have to register in one lecture section. There's only one available, and one PRA section. The lecture section stops meeting after week 4. So you have 8 lectures in the first 4 weeks. Then all of your lecture time is done, and you get to switch schedules to one of these 6 PRAs. Questions about that? This is super important. Everything else we can handle. Everything else we kind of understand how it works. But this we need to get before I let you go today. So 1602, when you go to register for it, same as anything else, you get one LEC, one PRA. The LEC matters in the first 4 weeks, where it's double, 2 nights a week, you've got lectures for 1602. And starting in week 5, you no longer have lectures, you only go to those 2-hour practicum workshops, or let's call them studios. So what this means is that for the first 4 weeks, all of you will be together in a clump of 140, 160, 180, right? You're all learning together in these large lecture theaters. And once we get into the second half of the course, in week 5, you split up into smaller studios of about 35 or 40, right? So you suddenly get to go from big, giant lecture theater to smaller group with more direct guidance from a teaching assistant or from your instructor. Questions about 1602? This is a little bit of an extra challenge for scheduling the rest of your work as well, because 1602 might conflict with another course either in the first 4 weeks when it's offered 2 evenings a week, or 2 evenings that week, or your PRA section might conflict with another course later on. So be extra careful when you're choosing these and when you're putting that together. Okay, we talked about a lot of stuff. With your permission, I'm going to run for another 10 minutes because we need to talk about electives in the program. Ashfaq asks, how are the tests scheduled? You will learn all of that when you go into 1602. Right, 1602, as far as I know, does not have any like in-class tests, like handwriting tests to write. Evaluation for that course is fairly complicated, consists of homework assignments, independent study, group project. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, that's a question for Professor St. Cyr when you see him on your first day of class. Yeah, good question. Better ask the person who actually has the authority to administer that course. All right, let's rock it. So electives. The way these work generally is we've got internal electives that are very, very, very explicitly for UXD students. They're taught by UXD profs. They are on UXD topics. They have prerequisites that are our required courses. So these are the ones that I encourage you to consider the most or first. Then there are electives that are outside of our concentration that are either in other concentrations or they are cross-concentration electives within the iSchool. And then after that, or outside of that, there are electives that are courses offered by other departments or other faculties. So ours, our concentrations electives first, then some of these cross-concentration electives that might also be interesting to you, then consider external courses. If you're interested in that, send me an email and I can send you a list of UXD relevant courses that are offered outside of our faculty. The challenge with those is that they may sound like they're relevant, they may sound really interesting, they may have really strict restrictions about students, right? You may not be able to take a Rotman School of Business course or a Faculty of Medicine course without explicit permission from that host faculty, and they're not required to give you that permission. So as much as you can, stick to electives that we have and you are on home turf when you take them. So in the fall of 2023, we have one course that is explicitly appropriate for first years. You don't have to take it in your first year, but we recommend that you think about it because I believe it isn't always offered. This is the other problem with electives. Required courses are on a pretty rigid schedule. They're offered every year, obviously, because we have new students every year. In terms of electives may be offered or may not be offered on any given year because they're electives. Depends on who's teaching them, who has time to do it, whether they're teaching in the fall or in the winter changes every year. This year, we have INF 2201. 2201 is ICT, which is Information and Communication Technologies, Design and Marginality. This is a course on marginalized user groups and on the notion of marginality, how there seems to be a mainstream for which all technology is made, and then everybody else is almost by default excluded or underrepresented or underserved. This is a course that you do not need a prerequisite for, so it's appropriate and available to first years to enroll in. And it's a course that I strongly recommend if you have an interest in those kinds of things, in understanding different kinds of marginality based on part of the world, and how that part of the world is served by technology, based on potentially race or nationality or ethnicity or group status or accessibility. It's an overview course of the different aspects of marginality that we may need to contend with and to make sure are well represented as they come through. Now, these are electives that you will see in the program, but they are mostly restricted to second year students. So keep them in mind, but you will not be able to take them this year. So in the fall, we've got INF 2164, which is UX Research and Design for Video Games. This is my elective course. It is possible. It may open up for first year students later on in the enrollment process. For now, it's restricted to second years, but it depends on how many second years are able to take it. And once they have figured that out, it's possible this course may be offered to first year students. Don't quote me on it. I have to figure out if that's going to happen. The rest of these, so accessibility and inclusive design, INF 2165, wonderful course about the needs of accessibility. I recommend strongly that you take it, but you will not be able to take it this year because it is restricted to second years. INF 2200, UX Leadership and Influence, is taught by an external lecturer who is also a multi-year professional in industry. It's a course about, once you know all the basics, how do you actually become how do you actually influence and lead the field or influence and lead a large company towards better UX practices. And then we have INF 2208, User-Centered Systems for Communication. This is a course by one of our research professors, Professor Kuzmanik, and it's about different ways of communicating with artificial agents, so AI or chatbots or nonverbal communication with technology. Very interesting course, again, restricted to second years. So these are all of our, on this slide and the next slide, slides 20 and 21, we have all of the courses that we offer and recommend within the UXD concentration. Keep these in mind for your second year. In the winter, things get a little bit easier. We only have 2 electives that are specifically UXD. Those are INF 2171. This is the usability assessment course. It's a deeper dive into research and assessment methods. It covers the tail end of that process, as well as kind of the intermediate, middle research step and the tail end step. It's an elective, but almost all of our students take it. And it is offered in the winter. The prerequisites, I believe, you will have met by then. And so you can take that course in the winter. And then INF 2224, service design. Service design is more about how to accomplish, how to design the structure within an organization that is able to meet user needs out there. So interface, interaction, user experience design is on the user side of things. Service design is on the organization side of things. Also a very good elective to take or to consider taking. Again, you're not going to have time for all of these, nor will all of them be offered when you can take them, nor will all of them have space. But depending on what your preferences are, accessibility is a really important course. Video games, I like it because I'm teaching it. It sounds very cool and exciting. Video games are a lot of work as well, and design for them, UX design for them is fairly complicated. But all these courses are available to you from within our concentration. We talked a little bit about dual concentration stuff. While I don't know a ton about it, I do know that one of our superpowers at this faculty is that we can take courses from other concentrations that may be adjacent to ours or not adjacent to ours at all. So some neighboring concentrations that we have, neighboring, I mean, what they teach is very useful and very interesting and very similar, to some of the things that we have to contend with. It's an extension of our work that is close to our hearts. One of those concentrations is human-centered data science, led by Professor Shayan Guha, whom you saw on that professor slide. Some courses in HCDS that you might be able to take, even if it's not a second concentration. INF 1340 is programming for data science. So you use something like Python or R to get a little bit of programming knowledge. You don't need any prerequisite programming for that, but in the context of data science. So this is a great concentration to take courses in if you're interested both in the qualitative, subjective experience of people and also in being able to back it up with data and stats. Right? 1344 is stats for data science. We will do a little bit of stats in our concentration, but not nearly enough to be able to speak confidently on statistical matters, whereas this course is a full course on that. And then INF 2178, which is a little bit more advanced. You might need to have taken some of the others to get it, but that is about experimental design in data science. So how do you set up a situation in which you can have a data science question answered by events that happen in the world? Our other neighbor or sibling concentration is information systems and design. This is more about software design and system design. The courses here might be INF 1339, Introduction to Computational Thinking. UXD is primarily concerned with digital interfaces, and somebody had to code those and make them and put them on a computing device. Understanding how computers work is helpful to us, and so that's an interesting elective if you're more interested in the technical side and more in the logical and computer sciencey side of computers. And then INF 2040 is actually a course that a lot of people take from across concentrations. It usually has a lot of space in it. It's offered a lot. It is the project management course. How do we get, a big giant project that may take 4 years and $2 million to complete? How do we get that thing from start to finish? Right? What is required to manage a project of that size? Highly recommend that course. I've taught it in the past. It is being taught by excellent lecturers who have a lot of experience managing these giant projects, and it will be helpful to you no matter what you choose to do. Right, so we've gone from the inner band, courses that we specifically offer, our instructors teach, to neighboring concentrations, and then I'll give you kind of an unsorted list of other courses that might be relevant to some of you and might be interesting as electives to take. Many of these you'll see are required courses for other concentrations or, generally attached to other concentrations. In particular, critical making, INF 2241 is a wonderful course. It's, getting your hands dirty and doing Arduino stuff while thinking about, kind of making something that will elicit discussion, conversation, challenge, change. Really cool course taught by one of our best professors, Professor Matt Ratto, who is he's important and wonderful, and he teaches that course with a lot of flair and a deep and extensive knowledge of the world of digital technology. Remix culture is also a good one. Anyway, so any of these would be fun if you were interested in. So 10 minutes past the hour, you'll get used to that as a start time for UFT courses, but that's where we are. What kinds of questions can I answer for you folks at this stage? And while I do, remember, these are your contact points. This slide deck is available in the first link. Please shoot me an email about any additional UXD related questions, and I'll be happy to answer or pass you along to somebody who knows the answer. And for any other inquiries, inquire.ischool is great for students once the semester starts, but also please email admissions.ischool for questions pertaining to you folks who are kind of like just starting, you're about to become current students, but you're not there yet. Admissions.ischool. I've got nowhere to be. Ask me some questions. This is the time. They don't have to be about courses. They could be about anything else UXD related. I know we'll see each other very soon. I'll be teaching you. I'll be teaching you stuff in the winter, and you'll be with Professor St. Cyr in the fall. But I'll be your point of contact for, structuring these courses in a sequence, or course exclusions, or what courses are relevant or not relevant to the concentration, or portfolio reviews, that kind of thing. Franklin asks, can MI students take MMST courses? MMST, the Master of Museum Studies program, that is a really good question. At base, I don't think so. You'd have to check with that. There is a combined degree program between MMST and the MI. So you could take you could be doing an MI concentration and also, be an MMST. But that is a great question for admissions. Many of us, I know of students who have taken those, but I believe those were all in the combined degree program. But I will check. Ashfaq, you have your hand up. What's up?
So Professor, my question is regarding the electives for which are restricted for second years, right? So I understand that if we are doing co-op, we'll have to do summer and fall 2 terms to get full credit, right? So how does it work? So you have these restricted courses for second years, which is for example, for us, it would be fall 2024. So how do previous students take this up, right? Is it like 1 course, 2 course, or if you're working somewhere else in Canada or some other city out of Toronto, Ontario, then how does that work? Right.
That's a good question. Okay, so let's go to those.
Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
I interrupted you. That was it. Okay, yeah. So let's go back to those courses. So the big question here is, okay, if I'm on co-op in the fall term of my second year, how do I take these courses? A few answers for you. If you are working locally, right? So if you're working in Toronto, you can take courses at the same time as your co-op placement. Many of these have evening sections or are offered in the evening, not all and not always. So that's one option. The other thing is that these courses are not always offered in these terms. Sometimes the last time I taught 2164 was in the winter, not in the fall, right? So you'll be taking elective courses when you come back from co-op in the winter. You might also be able to take some of these courses in the summer. I haven't really looked closely at what courses are available or offered in the summer, but that's also an option. And if all else fails, right, you can take them the following fall, which is pretty far away. Likely not, but yeah, so these are generally, we generally try to have enough choice and enough interesting sequencing for our students to be able to take in the winter of their second year. Yeah. Now, if you're working outside of the area, right, so if your placement is somewhere else, then unfortunately you will not be able to attend an in-person course during that same term. Most of these are not offered remotely. We are not accredited to offer online courses. So there's some significant, some exceptions maybe around where somebody's like, yeah, we do meet in person synchronously, but you can participate by Zoom. Most courses do not have that option. Yeah.
Okay. So if we are working locally, what would be the suggested course load, right? Per term.
Probably not
Somewhere
more
in-
than if you're doing co-op, probably no more than one other course.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Yeah, for anything to do with MI students taking MSD courses, double concentrations, auto enrollment. I am sorry, I don't have the latest information for you. These are great questions for admissions.iSchool. And he asks, are there remote co-op positions? There have been, yes, and sometimes we still see that. So there are many of our students who do co-op placements remotely, and it really depends on the organization. Sometimes the remote is great, and it's encouraged, and some organizations do not offer remote placements. So that is a possibility. I see a hand up, Yancy, go ahead.
Hey, how are you?
Doing all right. I see a camera. Yes, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. So I have a quick question. Could you just briefly talk about what the CSIS space looks like? And can we do both co-op and CSIS-based pathways?
Right, so co-op and thesis. That is also a good question. Yeah, so thesis-based pathway. Let's see what's... The simple answer is I'm not sure. We have very, very few thesis students generally. And it's a great pathway. But it is the kind of thing that intersects interestingly with other stuff. You should be able... yeah, the load of a thesis pathway makes it difficult to also do the co-op requirements at the same time. It's next to impossible to do both those at the same time without doing 3 years or extending a bunch. I would recommend looking at, when you get a student advisor, see how viable that is. And if somebody's done it, and you could be somebody who's tried it, yes. Otherwise, generally, the thesis pathway, the reason this is interesting, the interesting thing is that, generally, we think of these as exclusive options, right? So either you do the concentration, or the concentration plus co-op, or the concentration plus thesis. There's a strong reason for that. And in fact, in almost all cases, you'll be, administrators will be like, don't try, like there's a reason these are exclusive to each other. When you go do the thesis option, generally you'll be doing a few extra courses, right? So there is 0.5 CR for research methods, which is important, 0.5 for an independent reading course, which basically forms the literature review, kind of the background information portion of your thesis, and then a full 2 CR of a thesis work. So this is the closest we get to an academic master's degree. Generally, the MI is a professional degree. We call it a terminal degree sometimes, which sounds scary, but it just means that you don't need to do any more learning or any more school to start working in that particular, in library science or archives or UXD. The thesis prepares you for something like a PhD in information, if you wanted that. It's not the only way to get a PhD, to start a PhD in information, but it's the reason why the thesis option exists. So in some ways, if you're trying to fulfill lots of industry requirements with co-op and lots of academic requirements for a thesis, those two things can't happen at the same time in the same 2 years.
Okay.
And the
That's
thesis option, it's fun, and you need to find a supervisor, right, who will kind of support you through that thesis process, and you get to do a project that's relevant to their work, and also to yours, mostly to yours. Yeah.
So one last quick question. So if I choose the space, if the publication is a requirement to allow me to graduate, or just finish my paper is fine?
That's a good question. As far as I know, publication is a very nebulous and difficult and hard thing to codify. So we don't require that you publish somewhere. We require that you write a thesis. That thesis has an examination, right? So there's a thesis. So at the end of your thesis process, you will present that thesis to a second reader and to like a small committee of professors, and they will basically pass or fail you based on that document. You don't have to publish it anywhere else. It's an internal thesis. But if you do publish, then that sets you up for more publications later on. Yeah, and your thesis supervisor may have opinions about you publishing. They may want to publish with you. They may want to give you that experience and give you that head start, but it's not a requirement.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So if I choose only to focusing on the co-op, is there any other opportunities to be the RA, the research assistant to support the professors to do their
There
own?
are. Yeah, that is a good question. So the more academic side of this is you can still take a reading course with a professor. So that's mostly about the research, the academic research side of things. You read a bunch of papers and you summarize them. And there may be a small component where you do you add your own thoughts to that process. But all of so we have 3 research stream colleagues, 3 research stream UXD folks, and other research stream people at the faculty. They're always looking for, so if they have money, if they're working on projects that require research assistant support, they're open to hiring MI students, PhD students, sometimes even bachelor students. And yes, there is some experience for that. It will not count for credit. It's more like a paid research assistantship position, but it gives you more opportunities to sample the academic side of our field. Yeah, good questions.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Elise has a question in the chat. Is there a course in which we learn how to create an effective portfolio? Good question. So in 1602, which is the fundamentals of UX course, you are going to, if it's taught the way it was taught last year, you will be creating an end-to-end case study and also creating the portfolio in which that study is presented. So there will be some instruction in that course on how to create a portfolio and some requirement that that portfolio appear at the end of the term. And you'll get graded on the portfolio and it'll be helpful to you that way. In practice, your portfolio is going to take up a lot of your own time as well. I tend to run portfolio workshops where, for an hour, I collect people's portfolios and I critique them and I give general advice on how your portfolio should look. I also conduct, I'm not the only one, but I do most of these. I conduct one-on-one portfolio review sessions. So towards the middle of the winter term, February 2024 kind of deal, when you've got your case study in, you've got your portfolio, you've got your grades back, and you're ready to start working on it, do another iteration and then book some time with me. And you'll find a way to, I will make sure that everybody knows how to get in touch with me. And we can do a half hour of portfolio review. And I review them the way a hiring manager would. So you get a little bit of instruction in class in 1602. Most of it is going to be on your own time with some support, some extracurricular support from us. All right, I think I've got 2 hands up. Let's go to Maury first. Maury, how can I help?
Hi, so I have a question about the co-op. In order to get the co-op designation on the transcript, is there any requirement for the co-op job position? Does it have to be related to UXD or does it have to be full-time, etc.?
Good question. Yeah, so the position has to be full-time, right? It has to meet the co-op requirements, and so those things have already been vetted by your co-op professional. So we have a co-op, a careers and co-op staff, and what they do is they collect opportunities, they collect those job postings, and they put them on an internal job application site. So if you're in the co-op program, you'll have access to a list of co-op opportunities, any of which will complete your co-op designation, right? So they're all full-time. And they are not necessarily related to UXD specifically. So there isn't a co-op position that you can take from that list. It's like, oh, yeah, that's nice, but it's not UXD. Therefore, you don't get the designation. Because remember, co-op is a cross concentration. Let's put the co-op screens here. Co-op is a cross concentration